If a critical mass of newsrooms in the city of Philadelphia were coming together to report on one central topic from a solutions-oriented perspective, it had to be the economic situation in which our city lives.
The poorest big city in the nation, a quarter of the population in the regions in Philadelphia, but half of the poverty. It's dispersed throughout the city. It's not just certain neighborhoods.
For instance, for an adult with 2 children, the poverty line is about $19,000. To be in deep poverty, the threshold is half that. And in Philadelphia, about 12% of the population qualifies for deep poverty. You know, that's in the 180,000 range of people.
What should City Hall, City Council, the mayor, do with this report?
Well, one thing is they should talk about it. We don't talk about this.
When we first came together to form Broken Philly, of course, it was on the heels of the Reentry Project. Everyone involved there had a great experience, and that's why we were moving forward. And also in Broken Philly, we wanted to bring more newsrooms in. We wanted to make it sort of bigger and better, you know, a better sort of 2.0 version of what we were able to do in the first year with the Reentry Project.
So when we started Broken Philly, I was news director over at WHYY. And we had just gone through the first collaborative, the Reentry Project, which was really awesome and worked surprisingly well. Like I was on board for it, but I was worried whether it would work out. And so when we were starting with Broken Philly, I think my hope was that we would be able to keep the energy going, keeping like a lot of newsrooms who previously never talked to each other, never worked together, might like, you know, individual people might say hi when out on assignment and crossing paths, but like really keeping those connections going.
And so at the very, very beginning, I was on my own with this reporting project and also needing to basically stand up a nonprofit to be able to house the thing. That's when Cassie Haynes and I came together to co-found Resolve Philly, realizing there was a tremendous amount of opportunity in having this large group of newsrooms in one city working together on a project like Broken Philly, and at a more deeper level, wanting to do their work differently, wanting to think a lot more critically about how they were doing local journalism, and who were open to doing more solutions journalism, to doing more community responsive reporting. They were open to sort of all of these different things and ways of going about their practice.
At the very beginning, we had these long meetings with lots of people at a huge table, and it was kind of really exciting. There were people from the Inquirer and the TV stations and lots of little outlets, and I had never been at a table like that, where everyone was treated the same, everyone had the same amount of time to speak.
Some of these earlier meetings as the collab was forming, I was, one, really, really hopeful and excited about following this through line of economic justice and economic organizing and learning, I think, almost like a journalist definition of economic mobility.
Economic mobility.
Economic mobility.
We purposely use the phrase economic mobility as the idea of like people able to better their life, their situation, their family situation.
The increasing chance that you are able to thrive and not just survive.
To not be locked in place with a certain income or definition that is outside of your control entirely.
And so the idea is that of the project was to look at solutions to the barriers that exist, whether they're systemic or whether they're individual, and figure out ways to increase the opportunity for economic mobility for Philadelphians and people in the Philly region.
19 newsrooms came together to decide on this topic. It wasn't, we had sourced ideas in a number of different ways, from community engagement events to a text line to an open, web survey, and people obviously talking to their colleagues in their own newsrooms. So I remember coming together and wrestling with the decision of what the next topic should be. And we really came to this conclusion that, if a critical mass of newsrooms are focusing on something, it should be this.
Had the opportunity to talk about the problem of poverty in Philadelphia in a different way and be more thoughtful, more intentional, and frankly, less reactionary.
Community organizations and folks, like relationships I had developed during the reentry project, so with a number of organizations that were led by formerly incarcerated people that were, serving that group and that community in the city, I remember them being really excited. The sense that I got, or in conversations with them, what they would tell me is all of these other issues that you guys are focusing on, whether it's reentry from prison, failing public schools, whatever it is, it all boils down to economics. It all boils down to poverty. It all boils down to the lack of economic mobility. And so I think there was a sense of like, okay, finally, you guys are like tackling a root issue here and not just some of the symptoms or other things that arise because of this systemic problem. So one of the things we realized early on was we need a team. We need more shared resources for this group of newsrooms who are working together. Our thought was, what if we added more human resources to that? What if there was not just a project editor, but there was a data journalist, a data editor? What if there was not just a project editor, but also a community engagement editor? What if there were people who were helping to help the newsrooms put into practice more of the things they say they wanted to do?
And I guess we give Gigi, if he's there, an update. I know I haven't.
So my role was basically, I had to come up with a strategy for engagement for the whole news collaborative at the time. I think it was 26 news organizations. And for me, it was about building relationships first. So I had to build relationships with communities in order for me to, one, come up with a plan, but two, to take those relationships and also build relationships with the journalists and work as kind of like a navigator, because we navigate complex relationships between communities and journalists and build those relationships and try to bring them together in order to do authentic reporting in our communities.
It can make a fundamental change in the kind of journalism you do if the first step is to go engage with folks. In 2021, we did a special series that was called The Toll, and it was looking at roots and causes of the spike in gun violence in Philly, and with a special emphasis and looking at things that have to do with stuff like poverty and barriers to people moving up and how that feeds into the problem of gun violence. And we were lucky enough that we did a series of what the CE team calls sound offs before we gave the green light to one story. It just had a completely different feel, because instead of starting at an editorial meeting where a bunch of journalists sitting around a table or on Zoom saying, well, this is a story I think we should do, we had ideas that came from those listening sessions of either things people wanted to know or why do you not pay attention to this, all those kinds of things that made the reporting just so different and I think just more useful. Making sure we're meeting the information needs of the people who are most living with the consequences of the gun violence.
a lot of journalism in general is based in like competition, where it's like you have to compete for readership. You don't want to link out to other newsrooms to like lose readerships to other people. And Resolve kind of came in, Broken Philly came in and was like, you know, put that to a side and like, let's discuss things that maybe will benefit our readership or, you know, pool our resources together just to do better work.
The collab model tells us that we don't need to be competitive. And so how do you come up with something like that? That means like if the solutions are outside of journalism, you need to bring in people who have worked outside of journalism. So the team that Jeevan Cassie built, along with having some of those award-winning traditional journalism skill sets, that is a part of a healthy organization that is trying to think outside of the box and operate outside of the box.
The Reentry Project really hooked me. And then I loved the way that they evolved and developed a collaborative process for decision making. And so it was a much smaller cohort of media organizations to start with the Reentry Project, but it slowly and steadily grew. And so when Resolve Philly was eventually named and this new focus of poverty or economic fragility was decided as the next wave of this collaborative, this Philadelphia-centric media collaboration, you know, I knew that WURD wanted to continue because these are the issues that most impact our listeners.
As a newer partner who wasn't a part of the Reentry Project, I remembered being a little bit in awe of seeing some of the faces behind some of the stories that I read, and to see that as a city planner, just to see people who were involved contribute to a conversation that was starting to brew about what could the next thing be, and Broken Philly being the focus, but also this idea that there could be some sort of infrastructure or foundation to continue supporting collaboratives as, you know, a collaborative, not just a collaborative reporting project, but as a collaborative.
Once the project was underway, one of the most critical things was teaching news outlets how to do collaborative journalism. It wasn't something that, you know, the movement was just starting and it really wasn't a common thing, at least not in Philly.
Billy Penn, Danya has been very nice collaborating with us.
As we were progressing, it became clearer that one thing that would make a lot of sense would be if you were to pitch an idea, it had to be in partnership with at least one other newsroom organization.
I think out of the kind of the competitive nature of journalism and the way we kind of all operate in our own kind of newsrooms, people were, you know, maybe hesitant or like, you know, what will this do? What does this mean for us? How will this even work?
It incentivized partnership, but it also meant that you were talking with people outside of even just a meeting. You had to sync up with them to come up with something to then put on paper to pitch.
And obviously now, after years of working within the collaborative, we saw it did help.
So hard to, especially in the media, to feel like anything that you've done individually has really, you know, oh, that changed policy, that changes. And that's the value, I think, of Broken Philly, is it's a network effect. And so we're not seeing reductions in violence. We're not seeing like the statistical things that are changing, but I do think narratives are changing. And I think that that's a very powerful part of what media can do.
If we want to produce news that people can use in their lives, like really use, then we have to be working together. We have to be doing a better job listening. We have to be doing a better job focusing on solutions, not just the problems themselves.
I mean, now, like, almost all of the major and minor media players are a part of Broken Philly. And so that, to me, is an incredible win.
People in general are really disaffected by the news. It doesn't make them feel good a lot of times. There's a lot of misinformation in news a lot of nowadays.
Oftentimes, journalists doesn't really, one, reflect the communities that they're reporting on, and two, really don't know the community in general. So I think a lot of times, and that's where this gap has grown over so many years and why folks feel a little hesitant talking to journalists, because they feel like their story won't be represented accurately.
I think in my career, or just as Broken Philly does things, I think it's about trying to make the news more approachable and just more accessible in general.
By doing the tabling and getting to know people and being out and volunteering, we actually volunteer oftentimes as well, and just getting to know folks, it kind of peels back layers of mistrust, because now they understand, okay, you may be a journalist, but they know who you are now. They see you in the community. You're not just there and parachuting in and getting your soundbite and leaving. You're actually want to know what's going on in the community and curious about the community, and also will want to tell a story that's reflective of the community accurately. So I think all of those things plays a part in our tabling and our sound offs and everything that we do. It's about building relationships. That's why our number one priority as a community engagement team is relationship building. And then trust oftentimes are peeled back because they understand now. They have a better understanding of the process of journalism. They have a better understanding of the person that's coming in their communities, and they feel more comfortable talking to them.
I think my impact working within the community as a result of Resolve is allowing people to use that connection, allow other people's voices in the community, and that kind of helps, I think, some of the things I do, but I feel there's a lot of people in underserved communities doing a lot of things that don't maybe get focused on, or the light isn't shined on them enough. So it's helpful to me to be able to create a platform outside the work I do to where they can also get acknowledged for that, and those stories are shared more than just the general community.
I've learned through my relationship with Resolve that the community has a voice, that we can come together and speak out and show the talents and the skills that are in the community.
I think I learned a lot about local news through working with Resolve by realizing there's a lot of similar issues going on in different parts of Philly that resonate in Kensington also, and then that a lot of times the more major news outlets aren't as focused on the smaller aspects of the broader stories.
It brought together people in newsrooms from different establishments, from 100-year-old established, paper of record newspapers in the city, to young, really fresh new startups with not a lot of money. But when you came to a Broken Philly meeting, that person from that established legacy newspaper had just as much say as that person from a small startup. So I think that level of playing field really kind of led to the success of the collaboration.
You are a part of something already when you're part of a newsroom. You're a part of something bigger when you're part of a collaborative. And then to know when you go to conferences, you're in LA or you're in Miami or you're in North Carolina, and someone's like, oh, I heard about you because we know Resolve, or we've been following Broken Philly. When you're part of a city, and a lot of folks that we work with have never left Philadelphia before, never left Pennsylvania, to think that our stories could go that far, I don't know what other definition of gold standard could just have that kind of national impact.
I think what's important also to remember about this work is that Even though Broken Philly as a collaborative reporting project is ending, it has fundamentally changed the way that journalists work together in the city. And that is important not because we should all care about how journalists work, but because it is actually going to lead to other ways of information circulating throughout the city in a way that we believe is gonna really materially benefit the health and well-being of residents in the city of Philadelphia.